Hi and welcome to episode 6. This week we're going to take a look at Omnisphere's state-of-the-art new browser, which is an essential part of the instrument because it allows you to organize and manage all your patches. But before we do that, I thought it would be fun to take a walk down memory lane and take a look at how far we've come in the history of patch storage. In the early days of synthesizers, you couldn't store any patches at all. In fact, our term patch comes from all the patch cables that were necessary to create the sound in the first place. So the only way you can store something like this is to take a picture of it with something like a Polaroid camera. And that's where the term snapshot automation comes from. The next generation of synthesizers like the ARP Odyssey and Minimoog didn't have patch cords, but they still had no way to save their sounds. So if I wanted to take a sound like this on the ARP Odyssey and save it, I would actually have to write down the settings of all of these sliders and switches on something called a patch sheet, which has sections for each of the different areas of the instrument, and then recreate it at a later time, one slider at a time. It's the same situation with the Minimoog. If I take something like this bass sound, I would actually need to write it down one switch at a time, give it my name, and then store that in my patch library like this. It's the old school patch library made of paper. The Yamaha CS80 has an interesting sort of programmable system. So the way it works is you have your panel controls, but underneath this lid, you pull it open, ta-da! Here's your mini controls. And the way this works is it's a duplicate of all the front panel controls, and then you change a slider on the panel, and then you match it over here with a little mini control, and you listen to the memory and the panel until they match. Once you finally get the sound to match, which takes quite a while, then you store the sound this way by closing the lid so that no one can screw up the settings. And this is the instrument that changed everything, the Sequential Circuit's Prophet 5, because it was the first instrument that could save and recall all of its panel settings to microprocessor memory, so you could go from one sound to the next. Now, this is something we take for granted today, but this was the first instrument that could actually save and record all of the parameters and call them back for later recall. So it opened up the world of synthesizers to non-synth programmers. Here you had 8 sounds on the front panel and 5 banks. So also the concept of banks came here. So you had a total of 40 sounds you could have, and if you wanted to go beyond 40 sounds, then you needed to connect something called a data cassette. This is a data cassette recorder. Let's take a listen to what the data sounds like. And that's the sound of the data being saved onto the cassette. Synthesizers like the DX7 introduced a new, more reliable type of patch storage called the memory cartridge.